Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and we are making podcast history here today because somehow in 760 episodes, we've never had a guest on to talk about buying businesses. And you know what? We went out and we found the best of the best when it comes to everything about buying, selling, mergers and acquisitions, everything. This guy literally is the best in the world. So let me tell you about him. His name is Richard Parker. Richard has been helping people achieve their dreams of owning a business for over 30 years. His How to Buy a Good Business at a Great Price program has sold over 100,000 copies in more than 80 countries. He has personally purchased 13 of his own companies plus one co-investment with purchase prices ranging from $50,000 to over $200 million. Richard, because he's the best of the best, he's appeared in Forbes, the New York Times, TheStreet.com, Entrepreneur Magazine, Inc., and has over 300 published articles to his credit. This is someone who not only teaches everyday entrepreneurs and wantrepreneurs, just like you and I, but he was also hired by the Dalio family office and for several years worked as a mentor to one of Ray Dalio's sons, teaching him the art of buying small businesses. And guess what? We all get to learn from him here today. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Richard Parker. All right, Richard, I am so very excited that you're here today. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here. I've followed your podcast. I love your enthusiasm. I'm really honored to be the first guest in this subject matter. Hopefully there'll be many more, and it opens up a whole breadth or a whole horizon of subjects that you want to cover for your audience. So that's great. And thank you for having me.
Heck yeah. No, thank you, Richard. I so appreciate those kind words. And I'm so excited about this. I feel like there's a few topics in the world of business where I feel like once you plant that seed, you can't forget about them. And my biggest fear for today's episode is I'm just like, gosh, Richard's probably going to turn me on to this year, 2024. I'm going to be like, what businesses can I acquire? What businesses can I merge with my own businesses? But before we get there into the subject matter, fill in those gaps. Take us beyond the bio. Tell us how the heck you landed into all these amazing things that you're doing and not only acquiring your own businesses, but helping others do that for themselves as well.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'll try to keep it short and as exciting as possible, because it's not that, it could be a little boring. But basically what happened is I was working for a company making a very good living. I've been in this business for 34 years, coming up on 34 years in all aspects of it. I was in my late 20s working for a consumer products company, and I was doing quite well, making $72,000 a year, which was quite a bit of money in 1989, 1990. And then I did this ridiculously stupid thing, and I invested in the stock market, buying under margin, which I had no idea what I was doing. And I pissed away $60,000 and blew away pretty much all the money that I had, and realized that I either have to go to Las Vegas. How am I going to recoup this money, right? There was just no way I was going to do it through a job. So I either have to go to Las Vegas and put it on 17 black, or win the lotto, which wasn't a possibility because I don't play the lotto. And then, it just became very obvious to me that I had to get into my own business and leave everything behind as far as work is concerned, even though I was on a terrific trajectory with the company that I was with. And I had my first child on the way and decided to go into my own business. And that worked out reasonably well. It took me a number of years to get out of my financial hole. However, I became very intrigued very quickly with this idea, once I had this first business, about growing my business through acquisitions, because it was just really, really difficult to grow my business just on increasing revenues and pounding away and doing it and say, hey, I could leapfrog this if I tuck in some companies that are doing similar things to what I was doing. So I started making a couple of acquisitions. I have no idea what the hell I was doing and made plenty of mistakes along the way. But I started acquiring some ancillary companies to what I was doing. The main product that I had, main service, was representing companies as a manufacturer's rep and distributor in the consumer products business, selling to retailers, and ended up acquiring some retail service companies, which what they do is they go into the actual retail stores to make sure that the merchandise that was sold in is properly displayed, and any ads that are being run, making sure the merchandise is up. And I bolted on a couple of businesses and started doing very well, getting a reputation for knowing how to complete some of these acquisitions. And don't get me wrong, I screwed up a few of them, plenty good as well. And then I had acquired the rights quite by accident to Sega Video for Eastern Canada, just at the time that Sega Video exploded. And my business basically went from like a $2.5 million business to a $30 million business within a year. And after a couple of years, I knew what was going to happen as a distributor and as a manufacturer's rep for them, started making too much money. And so they bought me out. And I anticipated that because it's very common. And I ended up relocating to South Florida. And I started looking to acquire businesses and came across one that I almost pulled the trigger on. And as I did my very detailed due diligence and was involved in it, the whole enterprise that I was looking at was like the financials were like a plate of spaghetti. And it was only through having gone through this before that I was able to recognize some of the issues and problems. And I decided to back out of the deal. And when I walked out of that meeting with the seller, telling them that I wasn't going to buy a business, I was standing in the parking lot, and I remember saying to myself, the average schmuck would have bought this business, not because, and I didn't, not because I'm that smart, but I had done it before. And so what does the average person do who's looking to buy a business? And that started me down a path of obsessive research to find out what does the average person do who's looking to buy a business, and started realizing there's no valuable resources for people. There's resources for people that have a Harvard MBA or tons of money that want to buy a business, but no one for the average person who's looking to buy a small Main Street business, a Main Street USA business type of thing. And resources, whether it be information, whether it be advisors, whether it be business brokers, there was just no robust help for anybody. And they were really on an island. And it's, buying business is not difficult, but it's very complex. And so having recognized that in turn gave me the incentive to write the course that quite frankly teaches people what they need to know, tells them what they need to do and how to do it through the 23 steps of the business buying process. And it started out just as this idea to help one person buy the right business or avoid buying the wrong one. I just wanted to memorialize all my years of looking at businesses, and I'm at 100-something files on businesses I looked at. I never in my wildest dreams believed that it was going to turn to what it turned into today, 100,000 copies and helped tens of thousands of people. And so that's how I got into this whole information business.
Yeah, Richard, gosh, do I love that overview. I love your own story because I feel like we're always looking, all of us, and that's why this show exists. We're all looking for ways to accelerate our growth. And you're right. We so frequently talk about revenue growth is something that we all aim for. It's also really hard. And guess what? It takes time. And that's why previously on the show, we've talked about the powerful strategies of partnership, for example, where if you're trying to grow your email list, why not leverage an already existing email list? And that's where you can partner. But Richard, it has crossed my mind in many cases before where I've thought, why don't I just buy a business that has an email list, that has a customer base? For example, in one of my businesses that I've got equity in, we sell supplements. And I'm just like, how can we get our hands inside of a business that already has health and fitness customers that want to buy our products? Let's just acquire that and use it under our own umbrella. However, I'm sure the first and foremost objection that you constantly have heard for decades now is, well, that's unattainable. How the heck am I going to do that? I don't have that type of money, Richard. What's your first approach? I think we have to start there when it comes to how attainable it is for just normal people, I'm going to say that in air quotes, to acquire a business.
So it's a great question. I'll say on the overarching theme to this is anybody could do this. Not everybody will, but anybody can do this. This is certainly doable. As a drop down to that, individuals should understand that some of these, alleged gurus that teach people how to buy businesses for no money down is complete nonsense. That doesn't happen either. So you have on the one side, it's doable. On the other side, it does take some money, not a whole lot of money, but it does take money. And these ideas of buying, great businesses with no money down simply doesn't exist, because why would anyone sell you a good business or a great business and not take any money off the table? So, in answer to your question related to the financials, is it's going through this process to understand what's involved and how you need to attack this in a good way. You have, the name of your podcast is very similar to something that I've been telling people for years, which is entrepreneur or entrepreneur, which is some people will do it and some people are full of it. So the first step is clearly recognizing that you want to do this. And then as a drop down to that is gathering information so you know what's involved in the process. So anybody who thinks, well, I can't do this, this is just for big companies, it's not the case at all. There's financing that's available. There's seller financing that's available. There's other deal structures that are available. Businesses are bought and sold. As we're talking on the phone, businesses are being bought and sold. And so to individuals from other individuals. So it's clearly doable. It's just being able to take a step back and looking at this process and say, okay, how do I go about this in a good way? Which clearly the first couple of steps are, number one, you want to acquire the knowledge that you need to be able to go and do this in an effective way, because most people are first-time buyers. They have no idea, and their natural reaction is, I'm just going to jump in and look at businesses for sale, and that's why most people fail at this endeavor, which the stats are pretty disturbing. 90% of the people who begin the search to buy a business never complete a transaction, and that's because they go about it in the wrong way. So the first thing you want to do is get a hold of in your mind and understand what type of business is right for you. And then this process of searching for it and buying it is actually quite easy. So I would tell people, don't worry about the money piece. I mean, it's important part, but we can cover that, how that happens is take the approach that you're going to do this in a good way, that you're going to acquire the knowledge you need, and you want to be able to drill down as quickly as possible to finding the type of business that is right for you as an individual. Because a good business run by the wrong person will quickly go south. And similarly, there's lots of businesses run by the wrong person. So if you attach your skill set to the right business, your best skill set to the right business, more than likely you're going to flourish.
Yeah, Richard, I love that you've already called out all the fake influencers. This is why we haven't had someone on to cover this topic for a long time now, is because it is hard to cut through that noise. And I think in particular, anytime I open up TikTok, there's two businesses in particular that everyone seems, oh, if you buy this, boom, you're going to become a multimillionaire overnight. And those two businesses are laundromats and vending machines. People make it seem if you buy those businesses, you're going to become a millionaire overnight. And Richard, it tempts people because one thing we talk about on the show frequently is uninformed optimism. It seems so easy when you're uninformed about these things. So hearing you talk about first identifying what is the right type of business for me, I'm curious to go a little bit deeper there, because where my head goes is two ways. One, when you talk about what type of business, do you mean business model as far as service-based business, product-based business, digital business? And then secondly, or are we talking industries? Are we talking about, having a laundromat, having a local-based business versus having a digital business? How do we even start dissecting and I guess looking inward to ask ourselves, what type of business should I even be in the market for?
Okay, so there's a couple of questions there, and let me cover all of them and get to the point of what type of business I should be in the market for. This whole concept related to the gurus, which you reiterated, I've learned that if someone keeps telling you they're a guru, if you're a guru, you don't have to tell people. People know that. And that's one of the reasons why I've become much more incentivized with this particular business. When I say this particular business, our product, because I've been so discouraged by the amount of people that are being taken advantage of by being sold programs for thousands and thousands of dollars that simply don't work in the real world. I mean, pardon my French, complete bullshit. And it's really, you're taking advantage of someone at a very vulnerable time. And so, let's put that aside and hopefully people will understand that you want practical real world information that's going to help get you to the finish line. And so choosing the right business, here's where it's very important for people to understand, to separate experience from expertise. Experience is typically what you've done in certain industries or industries that you've worked in. So the first inclination of people is to say, well, I've always been in healthcare, or I've been in commercial cleaning business, or I've been working for a distribution company, and so I should stay in the healthcare business or distribution or commercial cleaning. And that the industry that you are in, that's experience. That is not expertise. Expertise is what you have done within those particular jobs and have done well. Everybody has one shining skill set. And whether that be sales, marketing, putting a plan together, logistics, manufacturing oversight, whatever that case may be, everybody has one terrific skill set. And the goal is the following. Whatever it is that you do best has to be the single most important driving factor of the revenues and profits of any business you consider purchasing. Meaning you want to marry your greatest skill set to a business that needs that to drive the revenues and profits of that company. Because for everything else, you can hire. Now, how do you do that? So there's a couple of ways. The first thing is the process of elimination. You have these business for sale websites that are online, these databases. Most of those are garbage businesses, but it's a terrific laboratory for you to be able to take this like in a hopper and look at this and squeeze something out small at the bottom. Or another analogy is to start out like a shotgun approach and then get to a laser beam. So you pick out 3 or 4 categories that you're interested in. Sometimes it's easier to pick out all the categories you're not interested in. So if you know you don't want to buy restaurants, gas stations, convenience stores, or hair salons or laundromats, for example, you rule out all of those and you pick out 3 or 4 categories. And it could be manufacturing, it could be durable medical equipment, it could be a distribution company, whatever they may be. And then you pick out 3 or 4 or 5 particular businesses that are listed for sale within those categories, and you go meet with the sellers and you ask the question. There's 36 questions you want to ask every seller, but you can go through the process. So then you pick out 4 categories. You pick up, for example, 4 sellers or 5 sellers. You suddenly have a sampling of 20 businesses that you can interview and analyze and evaluate. And from that, you can whittle the list down a little further. Now, if none of those are appealing and you realize you don't have the right specific skill set for that, you rinse and repeat. You just pick 4 more and 5 more sellers and you go through again. And what happens is through that exercise, it starts to become apparent what type of business is going to make sense for you. And then you can broaden your search beyond these business for sale websites, doing some direct solicitations, getting the word out to people in the industry and trade associations. But that's how you narrow down the focus. Because for most people at the beginning, they have no clue whatsoever what type of business is right for them, or they think they know what may be right, but it's actually wrong.
Wow, Richard, I've never heard anyone talk about experience versus expertise. I think for all of us tuning in here today, I think that's an important consideration for us. I love that you called out, we are not pigeonholed or limited by our past experiences. How often do we hear entrepreneurs? Richard, it's true for both you and I that if you look at our professional careers, it's all of these things, these skills that we've gained have translated into other industries, into other verticals and horizontals all across the entire business spectrum. So I love that perspective. I also love that you're very clear in calling out so much of the BS that if we just do a quick Google search, we're going to fall into. I remember back when I was 20 and I wanted to buy a blog, for example, I went to flippa.com and it was just all terrible businesses, Richard. But it really makes me think about that's what we see on TV when we watch business shows. It's always, bar rescue, someone going into a horrible business where literally the walls are falling down and they have to rescue this. But I think that's what's so powerful about your business and your approach and what you help people with is buying good businesses. Richard, talk us off that ledge. If we're picturing ourselves walking into an absolutely failing business and paying money to do so and wondering, can we rescue this? What does that reality look like? What does a good business to buy actually look like?
Okay, so they're actually 2 very different scenarios, right? And this idea of buying distressed business, and I'll just touch upon this for a second, was a couple of things. First of all, it has the word stress in it for a reason because it's nothing but stressful. If you don't have a wealth of experience operating businesses, you don't want to get into a distressed business or a turnaround situation because you're absolutely not going to be able to be successful at that business because you don't even know what to do first. There's a reason why it's a distressed business. And my whole philosophy is buy a good business. And here's what I mean by that. I look at the life cycle of a business. I call it the 3 G's of the mountain, 3 G's as the letter G. At the beginning of a new enterprise, a startup, those businesses are all garbage. And the reason why they're all garbage, because even if the concept is, you believe it's good, there's nothing proven yet. There's no sales. There's nothing in place. You don't know if that business is ever going to make it. And the failure rate, it's 96% of startups fail within the first 5 years. And so we know that if you're starting a business from the beginning, from the ground up, chances of success are very small. So I lump all of those businesses, including distressed businesses. But when we talk about this trajectory in the life cycle of a business, at the beginning, all businesses are garbage. At the top of the heap, at the pinnacle or the summit, that's where you have great businesses. In between is where you have good businesses. That means a business that's gone past the startup phase. It's recognized what business it is in. It's gone through all the hiccups and the speed bumps that come into place with starting a business, and it's starting to do well. And it's on the road to generating sales, it's generating profits, has people in place, has customers, has some infrastructure. And that's somewhat, it's past the startup. We'll call it in the middle of the hill. And that's what I call a good business. It's not a great business because you want to buy something that is good, that's solid, okay, that you can take over, that will transition well to you as the new owner. And then you can take it from the good to the great stage. Because after great, the business cycle drops. That's just the history of businesses. It reaches a pinnacle and then it typically drops. So you want to get it in the middle, even a little below, when it's at the good stage. The fundamentals are in place. You have this great platform on which you could build, and you can take it to the great level and then, exit or keep growing it.
Yeah, I'm so glad that I asked you that, because that's one thing that really stood out to me about your work and the way that you help people is you specifically. I know how intentional you are, Richard, with your words and with the way that you make these decisions. And it stood out to me like a sore thumb, your component of a good business. So hearing your perspective on that explains so much. I also feel really safe here with you to call out so much of the BS that happens in the business world, because one other piece of BS that I'm so excited for you to shatter for us and shed some light on for us is that valuation. We hear all these things from the tech space. I'm going to call out in particular about all these multiples, businesses selling for 20x multiples, or businesses that are selling with no revenue in place and they're valued at billions of dollars, as we've seen a lot of those companies come crashing down after Super Bowl ads and the likes of that. How do we go about valuing a business, Richard? Because I feel like for so many people, and I know that your resources go very in depth into that. Listeners, we're going to tell you how to get your hands on all of Richard's resources here today. But Richard, where do we even start that conversation about correctly valuing our business? And I'm going to put a big caveat in there for listeners to perk their ears up, whether we're looking to buy a business or whether we're looking to sell our business. If you entrepreneurs out there are thinking, how much is my business worth? Let's talk business value, Richard. Where do we start there?
Okay, so the last thing you said is really important, which is how, if you're a business owner, is how much is my business worth? And what I've seen over doing this for 34 years is it's very consistent. Is generally, speaking, what an individual or a seller thinks their business is worth rarely has anything to do with the value. Now, valuation is more of an art than it is a science, because there's a lot of components to take into place. But all of these, where people go off the reservation, is exactly to the point you said, where you read in the papers or you're watching the news and you see these businesses selling at 8, 10, 12, 30 times earnings, sometimes projected earnings. That's all smoking crack. That just does not make sense in the real world, because you have to get a reasonable return on your investment. And so, expectation from a seller's perspective, they need to have realistic expectations. And they also need to be very cautious about the fact of something that's pervasive in the business brokerage world. And I do intermediary work. So if I'm saying anything that sounds disparaging about business brokers, I'm in that group as well. I represent, lower market businesses. So what happens is business brokers go out and get listings. And far too often, they price the business at whatever the seller wants for the business, because they just want to get the listing. And then the procedure in business brokerage, well, if you don't get any offers after 30 days, you go back to the seller and you lower the price of the business. And that causes just terrible collateral damage, because you've set unrealistic expectations for the sellers. So now from a buyer's perspective, it's somewhere in the following. You have on one end of the scale, if you're going to make an investment, you can go to Las Vegas, put it on 17 black and get 35-1 returns. Or you can put it under your mattress or buy a CD at the bank or put it into a savings account and get a couple of % interest. So you have those two, opposite ends of the scale. Somewhere in the middle is where a business, where a business valuation has to follow return on investment. And where is that? So if you take some of these other factors that come into place, and this is actually going to lead up to the answer, so sorry to go about this in a long-winded way. If you put your money into the stock market over time, it'll average about 11%. And there, it's a very liquid investment, meaning you put your money in. If you want to sell your stock, you sell your stock. And you're not actively involved. So you have, putting it under your mattress, putting it in Las Vegas, or putting it into the stock market where there's an 11% average return over many years, and it's very liquid. A business is not a liquid investment because you can't just sell a business overnight. And so you need to get a better return. And so I look at this, that you need to get a 25 to 33% return on your cash investment, meaning if you're buying a business for, let's say, $1 million, you have to be able to get in somewhere in the neighborhood. You're going to be paying a 4 times multiple, 3 to 4 times multiple. So that business should be throwing off around $250,000 to $333,000 in order to pay $1 million in order to get your return. Okay. And you may be putting in only a couple of $100,000, and after debt service, it takes you to where that number is. So that's generally where you have to operate, is looking at this from the return perspective. At the same time, so that's the logical piece. So if you take a look at smaller businesses that are generating, let's call it under $1 million of owner benefits, or the adjusted earnings for the seller, those multiples on the high side are going to sell 5 times earning. Most real small Main Street USA businesses will sell at about 2 times, but somewhere in that neighborhood. And again, factoring in your return on your cash investment, meaning how much you're putting down versus how much is being leveraged, whether through seller financing or other vehicles. So now let's call that the scientific piece to it. Then you got to add the art piece of it, which is, what is a business worth to you as an individual? You have a job, you don't like your job, you want to be in your own business. And I read a study recently, I think it was by Gallup, that said 74% of working people either despise or really don't like their job. As you get into your own business, you're going to be, you're controlling your own destiny. You have an opportunity to build something. You have the opportunity to improve the lives of others. You can build value over time and then sell it for hopefully far more than you paid for it if you do it in the right way. Those type of benefits are worth a lot of money. Now, they're not scientific. You can't necessarily put a number on it, but you've got to factor in all those tremendous benefits that are going to come into play as well. And so when you combine those two, and on the scientific side, like I have, we developed a valuation program that's, become almost an industry standard that takes into account 50 fundamentals of the business, marries in the adjusted earnings number, and attaches a multiple for it. So it's a plug and play exercise. But you do have to factor in those benefits that you can't necessarily put a hard number to, because the rewards that you stand to achieve from owning your own business are almost priceless, right? So if you overpay slightly, who cares? Just think of the benefits you're going to get. So I look at this very much from an artistic and scientific perspective, and never trying to get away from, what am I trying to achieve here? I want to get the hell out of this job. I want to improve my life. I want to have more time for my family. Yes, I'm going to work harder at the beginning, but I want to be able to build something. I want to be able for it to grow. I want to gain some gratification from what I do every day. I want to get up and excited about it. And so that part, that's what I call the artistic part of it.
Yeah, Richard, I love the way that you break that down for us. I knew that we would run out of time here today, but I do want to squeeze in 2 more additional questions for you, because I know that listeners are going to be chomping at the bit to hear more. And of course, to find out more, which we're going to be talking about at the end. But Richard, I want to squeeze this in, considering people who are, you use the word bolt on, and I love that visual, because I'm picturing all of my different businesses and what can I bolt on to each of those businesses to accelerate their growth. And with that in mind, are there different or additional considerations? I'm especially thinking artistically, to go on your art and science analogy, is with me, if I want to bolt onto my existing businesses, maybe I want to buy it not for the cash flow, but for the technology that they might have, for the customer list that they might have, the email list that they might have. Are there those additional or artistic considerations when it comes to buying to acquire and expand your existing businesses?
100%. And it's the easiest way. Organic growth is very difficult, as I'm sure you understand, as I'm sure you probably have experienced yourself. So being able to bolt on businesses, whether it be for, ancillary businesses or competitors that either increase your revenue quickly or bring you some value, like you said, with a customer list or technology. It is the single easiest way to acquire that learning curve if you're looking at it from the artistic side, or to grow your business versus organically. And it's mind-boggling to me that small business owners, by and large, keep looking at this organic growth. And it's so damn hard at times, and so much time that's spent doing it, when it's so much easier to just go out and buy it. Yeah, it may take a couple of years to overpay, but think about it this way. If you have a good business as your base, and you don't need these other businesses to put money into your pocket immediately, you don't have to take a penny out of those businesses. You just plow all the profits back into those businesses, and to be able to grow them and your original business, the platform business. So, and then that's how I did it. My first business was successful. Like, don't get me wrong, along the way of the 13 that I bought, they weren't all great, but I never took money out of the second, third, fourth, and fifth business. I just kept plowing it back in. And so what you want to do is, yes, you look to competitors to buy out potentially competitors to improve top line, or buying businesses that add a feature, a function, a service, a need to the business. Like you said, a list, a customer list, etc. Because most of the time, it's infinitely more prudent to do that than try to do it on your own. Because the one thing is, they've already proven it. So even if it's a little more money to do that, you know it works. Versus doing it on your own, where you may plow in a lot of money and after 2 years say, shit, this thing didn't even work.
Yeah, Richard, I'll tell you what, I'm glad that this episode airs here in January, because we've got 2024 to take action on this. You are selling me. And the fun thing is you're not even in this to take money from people. You're genuinely helping them. I think it's such a unique part of the way that your business operates, is that you just genuinely love. I mean, you wrote it in your questionnaire. We always ask our guests for your zone of genius. Listeners know that we love to do this. And you wrote, I don't care about or need their money. My only goal is to help them achieve their dreams. And for you personally, this has helped you achieve your dreams and your lifestyle, and you've helped. I think that number is staggering, Richard. I think that I love how you said you aim to serve one person with your product. Since then, you've served over 100,000. And I think that's where it really comes from, is remembering the individual humans and lives that each of those numbers represents. I think it's super powerful. So Richard, my final question to you today is the question that I love posing to guests, because it's the most challenging one, because you've dropped so many knowledge bombs on us today. What's the takeaway? What's the one action? If there's one thing that listeners take away and consider, or most importantly, do from today's episode, what do you hope to see them take action on?
Okay, great question. I didn't anticipate it, but great question. So people who own a business, we've discussed the fact that that's already something they should consider, is growth through acquisition. But let's talk about the individuals, because these are the people that are near and dear to my heart and the people I want to help most. If you have any inclination whatsoever, or any dream, even it could be the size of a mustard seed, you owe it to yourself to go through the exercise of determining whether or not business ownership is for you. You don't want to go through your whole life with regrets. And this is something that is so easy to achieve. And I don't mean to diminish the work that's involved, because it's not difficult, it's just complex. But if you don't like your job, if you're not thrilled, if you want to give yourself an opportunity, if you want to prove it to yourself, whatever the size business, doesn't matter. You owe it to yourself to go through the exercise of determining whether or not entrepreneurship is for you. And, you have wantrepreneurs to entrepreneurship. I've always talked about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship. Some people will do it. Some people are full of it. But you really need to, if I beg anybody who's at all interested and, of getting into their own business, just find out what's involved, learn about it. Doesn't mean you have to do it, but you owe it to yourself to learn about it, because if you do that, I'm almost guaranteeing that if you're serious, you will find yourself on the path to business ownership.
Yes, that's why I love that quote. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And Richard,
amen to that. I have it on my quote list. That was somebody told me that years ago. Amen to that. It's 100% correct.
I love it. And you're totally preaching to the choir here. I know that this is why we're airing your episode here in January in a fresh year, because I know that there's going to be individual listeners out there who hear your call to action, Richard, and they're going to say, today is the day that I decide to take action. We can choose any day to be day one in our journey. And Richard, your call to action, I just think it's something that is innately so many of our listeners, speaking specifically to you entrepreneurs out there, you know you have that fire inside of you. And Richard is encouraging you, don't ignore it, investigate it, go deep into it, allow yourself that freedom to dream. And I really like that advice there, Richard. It's a different piece of advice. I knew that you'd be different here today, and I'm so excited that you came on. I also know that listeners are going to be like, Brian, stop talking. Ask Richard where the heck we can get our hands on the How to Buy a Good Business at a Great Price program. Richard, drop those links on us for listeners who want to go deeper into this world. Where can they learn more about your program, all the awesome work that you're up to? Feel free to drop all those links.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, and I appreciate it. So the easiest thing is go to richardparker.com. On that site, you have hundreds of articles, all free reports, hundreds of articles regarding each stage of the business buying process. Peruse those. There's tons of information. If someone is interested, the course that we sell, which, compared to what's available or these nonsense dreams for delusional products that are sold, we sell our product for under $200. That's available on Diomo.com, which is the abbreviation for doing it on my own. And you can find the course actually on richardparker.com. But as a first step on that site, tons of free articles and free reports. You don't have to buy the course. You'll get a ton of information that you're going to find to be incredibly helpful. And similarly, on the Contact Us page, if there's something you want to ask me directly, send in a submission to the Contact Us page. Just include a note that you want it forwarded to me, because if not, it'll be taken care of by your support department. But I'm happy to answer any specific questions that anybody has. So again, it's richardparker.com is where I suggest people go.
Yes, you are incredibly generous, Richard, in so many different ways, with your time, with your knowledge, with your expertise. Listeners, you already know the drill. We are dropping those links down in the show notes, wherever it is that you're tuning into today's episode. We're also dropping a link to Richard's personal LinkedIn if you want to connect with him and just say thank you for this episode. You see how generous he is. And I just want to echo it before we hop off the air today. Richard is not kidding when he talks about all the free resources that are on his website at richardparker.com. So definitely go check out his website. From free reports that you can download to all those articles that he mentioned, there's so much incredible stuff, all backed by real life statistics. That's the one thing that stands out for me about Richard's work, is that this is not theoretical. He is not a TikTok sensation who's getting rich off of talking about potentially doing this. This is someone who has real life experience. And I think one thing that you'll see when you go to richardparker.com that will stand out is you see him paint the real picture. Here are the pain points. Here's why most people don't take action. And here's the bridge to success. Here's how you can actually do that. So Richard, thanks for creating all of these roadmaps and setting so many entrepreneurs up for success. And most importantly, on behalf of myself and the listeners, thanks so much for coming and joining us here on the show today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your kind words, and I especially appreciate you having me. It's been great. Thanks again.